The digital clock on the hotel nightstand read 11:30 at night, when Vivian Whitman's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Her heart lifted as her husband's name appeared on the screen. 3 days away from home on this business trip had felt like an eternity, and Andrew's face was exactly what she needed to see before sleep. She smoothed her long brown hair, adjusted the emerald earrings he had given her for their last anniversary, and clicked to accept the call. "Hey, you!" Andrew's voice came through, warm and familiar, his dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his fingers through it, a habit she'd found endearing since they first met 10 years ago. "How's the Chicago conference going?" Vivian leaned against the hotel pillows, cradling her laptop. "Exhausting, but good. I closed the Henderson account today. They're going with our full marketing package for next quarter." "That's my girl," Andrew smiled, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. She noticed he was wearing the navy sweater she'd bought him last Christmas, the one Patricia, his mother, had helped her pick out during their traditional holiday shopping trip. "How are your parents?" Vivian asked, shifting the conversation. "Did they enjoy the dinner at that new Italian place?" Andrew's expression flickered almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, they loved it. Mom couldn't stop talking about the tiramisu." He glanced away from the camera. "She asked about you, of course. You know how she is. Always checking to make sure I'm treating her favorite daughter-in-law right." Vivian smiled, genuine warmth spreading through her chest. Patricia and Richard had welcomed her into their family with open arms from the very beginning. Unlike her own parents, who lived across the country and could barely be bothered to call on holidays, the Whitmans had given her the family connection she'd always craved. Sunday dinners, impromptu weeknight calls, Patricia's tendency to drop by with homemade soup when either of them caught so much as a sniffle. They were the parents she'd always wished for. "Tell them I miss them," Vivian said. "Maybe we can do brunch this weekend when I get back?" "Sure, they'd love that," Andrew replied, then suddenly glanced at something off-screen. "Hold on a sec," he said, standing up quickly. The laptop camera showed the ceiling of their bedroom for a moment before he adjusted it back down. "Sorry about that. Thought I heard something downstairs." But in that brief moment, when the camera angle shifted, something caught Vivian's eye. There, on her side of their king-sized bed, the left side, where she always slept, was a splash of bright red against the white sheets. It was small, rectangular, a phone, a bright red phone that definitely wasn't hers. Ice crystallized in Vivian's veins, but her face betrayed nothing. 8 years of marriage had taught her many things about Andrew, and one of them was that confrontation made him defensive and evasive. Whatever was happening, she wouldn't learn the truth through accusations thrown across 300 miles. "Everything okay down there?" she asked, her voice impressively steady. Andrew sat back down, running a hand through his hair again. "Yeah, all good. Probably just the neighbor's cat. That thing is always knocking over the trash cans." They didn't have trash cans outside. They used a dumpster in the alley behind their townhouse. But Vivian just nodded. "So, when are you coming home again?" Andrew asked, his voice casual, but with an undertone she couldn't quite place. Eagerness? Anxiety? "Thursday afternoon," she lied smoothly. Her actual return ticket was for Thursday morning, but something told her that information was now a strategic advantage. "The closing session runs until 3. Then I'll head to the airport." "Great, I'll pick you up. Text me your flight details?" "Actually," Vivian said, thinking quickly, "don't worry about it. I might grab dinner with some colleagues first, so I'll just take a cab home." After another 10 minutes of mundane conversation that Vivian barely registered, they said their goodnights. When the call ended, she sat motionless, staring at the blank screen while her mind raced. A red phone. On her side of the bed, Andrew, suddenly standing to adjust the camera, the strange edge to his voice. Her laptop screen dimmed from inactivity, and in the darkened reflection, Vivian saw her own face, composed, calculating. She opened a new browser tab and navigated to the airline website. Within minutes, she had changed her flight to the earliest available departure tomorrow morning, 6:15 a.m. She'd be home before noon. Next, she picked up her phone and scrolled to Patricia's number. She hesitated only briefly before pressing call, checking the time. Not quite midnight. Patricia and Richard were night owls. They'd still be up. "Vivian, sweetheart, is everything okay?" Patricia's warm voice answered, concern evident even through the phone lines. "Everything's fine, Patricia," Vivian assured her, forcing brightness into her tone. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. Richard and I were just watching that detective show you recommended. You know how we love our mysteries." Vivian took a deep breath. "I wanted to surprise Andrew tomorrow. My conference wrapped up early, so I'm catching a morning flight home. I was hoping maybe you and Richard might want to join me for a surprise lunch at our place. Say, around 1 o'clock?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by muffled conversation. Patricia relaying the invitation to Richard. "We'd love to," Patricia finally replied, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Richard has a doctor's appointment at 11:30, but we should be done by 12:30 at the latest." "Oh, this will be wonderful. Andrew's been a bit down lately. Said he's been missing you. This will cheer him right up." "Down lately?" Vivian's grip tightened on her phone, but her voice remained steady. "Perfect. I'll text you when I land. And Patricia, don't mention anything to Andrew. I really want this to be a surprise. My lips are sealed, dear. Richard says hello, and that he can't wait to see you. We've missed you at Sunday dinner." After hanging up, Vivian methodically began packing her suitcase, her movements precise and controlled. She plugged in her phone to charge and set an alarm for 4:30 a.m. Then she lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in her mind. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. Instead, she planned. 12 hours later, Vivian stood in the arrivals area of the airport, rolling her carry-on behind her as she texted Patricia. The flight had landed early, giving her time to freshen up in the airport restroom. She'd reapplied her signature red lipstick and brushed out her long brown hair. Her green blouse, Andrew always said it matched her eyes, was unwrinkled despite the flight, and she wore the pearl necklace Richard and Patricia had given her for her 33rd birthday. Just landed. "Everything on schedule?" she typed. Patricia's reply came almost immediately. "Richard's appointment went faster than expected. We're ready whenever you are. So excited." Vivian smiled slightly and hailed a taxi. Instead of giving the driver her home address, she provided the Whitmans' address across town. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Vivian gazed out the window at the familiar city skyline. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of building a life with Andrew. 8 years of Sunday dinners with his parents, holiday traditions, and future plans. And now, a red phone on her side of the bed. The taxi turned onto the tree-lined street where the Whitmans had lived for over 40 years. Their colonial-style home came into view, the place where Andrew had grown up, where they'd celebrated their engagement, where she'd found the family she'd always longed for. Vivian paid the driver, adding a generous tip, and rolled her suitcase up the familiar walkway. Before she could even ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal Patricia's beaming face, her silver hair elegantly styled as always. "Vivian!" she exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace that smelled of gardenia perfume and home-baked cookies. "Oh, it's so good to see you!" Richard appeared behind his wife, tall and distinguished with Andrew's same blue eyes. "There's our girl," he said warmly, waiting for his turn to hug her. How was the flight? Inside the Whitman home, everything was exactly as it always was. Comfortable, welcoming, filled with family photos including dozens of Vivian and Andrew. Their wedding portrait held the place of honor on the mantel. As Vivian sat at the kitchen counter accepting a cup of coffee from Patricia, she wondered how much longer these people would be in her life. The thought sent a wave of pain through her that was more acute than any anger toward Andrew. "So, what's the plan?" Richard asked, leaning against the counter. "I'm assuming you have one, since you've orchestrated this whole surprise?" Vivian took a sip of her coffee before answering. "I thought we could all go over together. I have a key, of course, but I wanted you both there for the surprise. Andrew isn't expecting any of us." Patricia clapped her hands together. "He's going to be so shocked. I haven't been able to keep a secret from that boy since he was 12, and we surprised him with that bike for Christmas." Vivian's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, I'm counting on him being very surprised." An hour later, Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs as she inserted her key into the front door of the townhouse she shared with Andrew. Patricia and Richard stood behind her, their faces alight with the innocent joy of surprising their son. Vivian had asked them to be quiet when they entered, suggesting they capture Andrew's reaction on video. She held her phone up as if preparing to record, though she hadn't actually pressed the button. "Ready?" she whispered, and the older couple nodded eagerly. The door swung open silently. Another detail Vivian had always appreciated about their home. Andrew was fastidious about maintenance, ensuring no hinge ever squeaked, no floorboard ever creaked. How ironic that the very quietness he'd cultivated would now work against him. The entryway was empty, the house still. From somewhere upstairs came the muffled sound of running water. The shower, Vivian guessed. Her suspicions crystallized into certainty, but she maintained her composure. "He must be upstairs," she whispered to Patricia and Richard. "Let's surprise him." As they climbed the stairs, Vivian noticed Patricia's confused glance at Andrew's keys and wallet on the entryway table. Next to them sat a woman's purse, sleek, expensive, unfamiliar. Patricia's eyes widened slightly, meeting Vivian's gaze with a question forming. But before any words could be spoken, they reached the top of the stairs, and the sound of the shower became clearer. So did another sound. Laughter. A woman's laughter, followed by Andrew's deeper chuckle. Richard froze, his hand tightening on the banister. The look he gave Vivian contained a dawning horror, a silent plea that this wasn't what it seemed. She met his gaze steadily, letting him see the cold knowledge in her eyes. This was exactly what it seemed. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth, but Vivian shook her head slightly, pressing a finger to her lips. Then she pointed toward the master bedroom, its door partially open. The older woman's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her expression hardening into something Vivian had never seen before. The three of them moved down the hallway in silence. Vivian pushed the bedroom door fully open, revealing a room in disarray, the bed unmade, clothes strewn about. On her nightstand, empty wine glasses, 2 of them. The shower shut off abruptly, and moments later, the bathroom door opened. Andrew emerged with a towel around his waist, his hair wet and slicked back. Behind him, wrapped in Vivian's plush bathrobe, the one Patricia had given her last Christmas, was a stunning blonde woman. She was younger than Vivian, perhaps 28 or 29, her hair piled messily atop her head, her makeup slightly smudged. "What movie did you want to?" Andrew began, then stopped dead when he saw the 3 people standing in his bedroom. The blonde woman bumped into him from behind, not yet seeing what had caused him to freeze. "What's wrong, babe?" she asked, peering around his shoulder. When she spotted the audience, she let out a small gasp and clutched the bathrobe tighter. For several heartbeats, no one spoke. The only sound was the tick, tick, tick of the antique clock on the wall. A wedding gift from Richard and Patricia. Andrew recovered first, his face draining of color. "Vivian," he breathed, "you're supposed to be in Chicago." "Clearly," Vivian replied, her voice glacial. "Mom? Dad?" Andrew's voice rose in panic as he finally registered his parents' presence. "What are you? Why are you?" "Andrew James Whitman." Patricia's voice cut through his stammering like a blade. "What have you done?" The blonde woman was edging back toward the bathroom, looking desperately for an escape. "I should go," she mumbled. "Julia, wait." Andrew reached for her arm, then seemed to realize this only made things worse. The name slipped out without thought, confirming what Vivian already knew. This wasn't some anonymous encounter. He knew this woman well enough to have her in their home, using Vivian's things. "Julia Thornton, I presume?" Vivian said coolly, causing the woman to freeze. "Don't worry about the bathrobe. You can keep it. I won't be needing it anymore." Julia looked mortified, her eyes darting between Andrew and the door like a cornered animal. "I didn't." "He said you were separated," she stammered. "He told me you were filing for divorce." Patricia made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Richard's face had turned to stone, his jaw clenched so tight Vivian could see a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Did he?" Vivian tilted her head slightly. "How interesting. We had a video call just last night. He didn't mention anything about separation or divorce." He turned to Andrew. "In fact, we made plans for when I returned, which, according to you, would be this evening, not this morning." Andrew's face contorted, desperation and calculation warring in his expression. "Viv, please, I can explain." "Don't call me that," Vivian cut him off. "Only people who respect me get to use that name." Julia had managed to gather a handful of clothing from around the room and was inching toward the bathroom again. "I'm going to get dressed," she said to no one in particular. "Andrew!" Richard finally spoke, his voice deeper and more severe than Vivian had ever heard it. "Get some clothes on. Now." As Andrew retreated to the walk-in closet and Julia disappeared into the bathroom, an awkward silence fell over the bedroom. Patricia moved to Vivian's side, placing a hand on her arm. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea." "None of us did," Vivian replied, patting Patricia's hand. "Well, I had a hint. Last night, during our call, I saw a red phone on my side of the bed." She gestured to the nightstand where, sure enough, a bright red phone case was visible. Richard paced the length of the bedroom, running a hand through his silver hair in a gesture so reminiscent of his son that it made Vivian's heart twist. "All those dinners," he muttered. "All those times he said you were working late or visiting friends." He turned to Vivian. "How long have you suspected?" "Until last night. Not at all," Vivian admitted. "We've been married 8 years. I trusted him completely." The bathroom door opened, and Julia emerged fully dressed, her face scrubbed clean and her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger without makeup, and somehow more vulnerable. "I'm just going to go," she said quietly. Andrew emerged from the closet at the same moment, now wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. "Julia, wait!" he called after her as she headed for the door. "Don't," she said firmly, not looking back. "Just don't, Andrew. This is humiliating enough." She paused at the bedroom doorway, turning to Vivian with genuine remorse in her eyes. "I really didn't know. I'm so sorry." After Julia had gone, the sound of her quick footsteps descending the stairs and the front door closing behind her punctuated the tense silence. Andrew stood in the middle of the room, looking lost. For the first time, Vivian really looked at him. The man she'd woken up beside for 8 years. The man she'd built dreams with. The man she'd believed in completely. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished by his actions. "How long?" she asked simply. Andrew swallowed hard. Vivian, please, can we talk about this alone?" He glanced meaningfully at his parents. "No," all 3 of them said in unison. Andrew's shoulders slumped. 6 months, he admitted. "But it wasn't serious until—" "6 months?" Patricia repeated, her voice shaking. "You've been betraying Vivian for half a year? You brought that woman into the home you share with your wife," Richard added, each word precise and cutting. "You gave her access to Vivian's personal spaces, her belongings." "I made a mistake," Andrew said desperately. "A terrible mistake. But we can work through this. Couples do it all the time." Vivian laughed, a short, harsh sound that contained no humor. "Work through this? You've been living a double life for 6 months, Andrew. You've been lying to me every day, looking me in the eye and telling me you love me while you were sleeping with another woman." "I do love you," he insisted, taking a step toward her. Vivian held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "No," You don't get to say that to me anymore. Son, Richard's stern voice cut through the tension. I think it's best if you pack a bag and give Vivian some space. Andrew's expression hardened slightly. This is my house too, Dad. You can't just kick me out. Actually, Vivian interjected, the deed is in my name. Or did you forget that detail when you insisted we put it that way for tax purposes? She crossed to the closet and pulled out a small suitcase, tossing it onto the bed. You have 30 minutes to pack whatever you need. After that, I'm changing the locks. You can't be serious. Andrew's voice rose in disbelief. Where am I supposed to go? That, Vivian said coldly, is no longer my concern. He's certainly not coming to our house, Patricia added, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I didn't raise my son to behave this way. Andrew looked stricken, his gaze darting between his parents and his wife. Mom, Dad, please. Richard shook his head slowly. Your mother's right, Andrew. You made your choices. Now you face the consequences. As Andrew began haphazardly throwing clothes into the suitcase, muttering under his breath about overreactions and second chances, Vivian stepped out of the bedroom. Patricia followed her, catching her arm in the hallway. Vivian, she said softly, whatever happens between you and Andrew, please know that Richard and I, her voice caught, we still consider you our daughter. That doesn't change. Tears threatened for the first time since Vivian had seen the red phone on her side of the bed. She pulled Patricia into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar gardenia scent. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea how much that means to me. That evening, after Andrew had departed with his hastily packed suitcase and multiple failed attempts to convince Vivian to reconsider, the house felt both emptier and somehow lighter. Patricia and Richard had stayed for hours, helping Vivian strip the bed of its linens and remake it with fresh sheets. They'd ordered takeout when none of them felt like cooking, and sat together in the living room, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. You don't have to stay, Vivian had told them when darkness fell outside. I'll be okay. We know you will, Richard had replied, squeezing her hand. You're the strongest person in this family. Always have been. Family. The word had brought fresh tears to Vivian's eyes. Now, alone in the house that suddenly felt more like a museum of her marriage than a home, Vivian sat on the edge of the bathtub, phone in hand. She had a dozen missed calls from Andrew, texts flooding in with desperate pleas and promises. She deleted them all without reading. Instead, she opened her email and composed a message to her boss, requesting 2 weeks of personal leave, effective immediately. She had vacation time accumulated. It was time to use it. With that task complete, Vivian moved methodically through the house, gathering items that belonged exclusively to Andrew, his favorite coffee mug, the framed photo of his college baseball team, the vintage record player he'd inherited from his grandfather. She placed everything in a cardboard box she found in the garage, labeling it with his name. Tomorrow, she would drop it at his office. No need for another confrontation. Her phone buzzed again. Andrew. Again. This time, she blocked his number. In the kitchen, Vivian opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of white wine Patricia had insisted on leaving for her. For medicinal purposes, the older woman had said with a wry smile. Vivian poured herself a generous glass and carried it upstairs to the master bathroom, where she ran a steaming bath, adding lavender oil. A gift from Julia, ironically, who'd left it behind in her hasty departure. As she sank into the fragrant water, wine glass in hand, Vivian felt the first real tremors of emotion breaking through her carefully maintained composure. A sob escaped her throat, followed by another, until she was crying openly, the tears mingling with the bathwater. She cried for the 8 years she'd invested in a man who could betray her so completely. She cried for the future they'd planned together, the children they'd talked about having, the retirement home in North Carolina they'd dreamed of buying. She cried for the woman she'd been just 24 hours ago, blissfully unaware that her life was built on lies. When the tears finally subsided and the bathwater cooled, Vivian emerged feeling oddly cleansed. She dried herself methodically, applied moisturizer to her face and body, and slipped into silk pajamas. In the bedroom, she pulled Andrew's pillow from the bed and tossed it into the corner. Tomorrow, she would buy new pillows. A new mattress, too, perhaps. Sleep came surprisingly easily, deep and dreamless. When Vivian woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and for a blissful moment, she forgot everything that had happened. Then reality crashed back, and she lay still, absorbing the impact. Her phone chimed with a text message. "Patricia, checking in, sweetheart. Richard and I are thinking of you. Call if you need anything at all." Vivian smiled faintly and typed a response. "I'm okay. Thank you for yesterday. Love you both." The reply came almost immediately. "We love you too. Always." That simple exchange gave Vivian the strength to get out of bed and face the day. She showered, dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft sweater, and made herself a proper breakfast, something she rarely had time for on workdays. As she ate, she made a list of practical steps. Contact a divorce attorney, change the locks, close joint accounts, update her will and insurance policies. The tasks were mundane, almost clerical, but each one represented another thread being cut from the fabric of her marriage. By noon, she had accomplished the most pressing items on her list. The locksmith had come and gone, leaving her with shiny new keys that only she possessed. Her appointment with a highly recommended divorce attorney was set for the following morning. The joint checking account was closed, with the balance transferred to a new account in her name only. Vivian was just considering what to do for lunch when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Andrew standing on the porch, his expression a carefully arranged mask of contrition. Behind him, parked at the curb, was his black BMW. "Vivian, please," he called through the door. "I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. We need to talk." Vivian leaned her forehead against the door, considering her options. She could ignore him, but he might cause a scene. She could call the police, but that seemed excessive. Or she could face him, on her terms, in broad daylight. She chose the third option. Opening the door just wide enough to see him properly, Vivian crossed her arms over her chest. "What do you want, Andrew?" He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. "Can I come in? Please? Just to talk." "No," she said firmly. "Say what you need to say from right there." Andrew ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I spent the night in my car," he said, gesturing toward the BMW. "I couldn't get a hotel room because all my credit cards were declined." "That's because they're joint accounts, and I froze them," Vivian explained calmly. "You should have access to your personal accounts and the cash in your wallet." "I don't have a personal account," he admitted, "and I don't carry much cash." For 8 years, Vivian had handled their finances. Andrew had claimed to hate dealing with money matters, so she'd taken care of everything. Paying bills, managing investments, balancing checkbooks. Now, she realized how convenient that arrangement had been for him. "That sounds like a you problem," she said, borrowing a phrase she'd heard younger colleagues use. Andrew's face hardened slightly. "Look, I know you're upset." "Upset?" Vivian laughed. "That's what you think I am. Upset is what happens when you forget our anniversary or work late on my birthday. This is something else, entirely. I made a mistake," he insisted. "A terrible mistake. But everyone deserves a second chance, Viv. We've been together for 10 years, married for 8. That has to count for something." "It counted for everything," she replied quietly. "That's why this hurts so much." Something like hope flickered in Andrew's eyes. "Then let me make it up to you. Let me earn your trust back. We can go to counseling. Take some time apart if you need it. Whatever it takes." Vivian studied him carefully. This man she'd once believed she knew better than anyone in the world. Even now, after everything, part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to imagine a path back to the life they'd shared. But another part, A stronger part recognized the manipulation behind his words, the selfishness that had always been there, hidden beneath his charm. "You're not sorry you had an affair," she said slowly. "You're sorry you got caught. If I hadn't changed my flight, if I hadn't seen that phone, you'd still be living your double life, lying to my face every day." "That's not true," Andrew protested. "I was going to end it with Julia. I was just waiting for the right time." "The right time?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "After 6 months? While you were still bringing her into our home? Letting her wear my clothes? Sleep in my bed? That's not someone looking for the right time to end an affair. That's someone who thought they'd never get caught." Andrew's expression shifted, frustration replacing contrition. "What do you want from me, Vivian? I've apologized. I've admitted I was wrong. What more can I do?" "Nothing," she said simply. "There's nothing you can do. Some things can't be fixed, Andrew. Some betrayals cut too deep. So, that's it? 10 years together, and you're just throwing it all away?" Vivian felt a surge of anger, hot and clarifying. "I didn't throw anything away. You did. The moment you decided that your desires were more important than our vows, our trust, our future. My parents put you up to this, didn't they?" Andrew's tone turned accusatory. "They've always thought you were too good for me, always taken your side in every argument." "Leave your parents out of this," Vivian warned. "They're heartbroken enough without you dragging them into your mess." "They're my parents," Andrew's voice rose. "Not yours. You don't get to turn them against me." Vivian felt a strange calm descend over her. "I didn't turn anyone against you, Andrew. You did that all by yourself." She began to close the door. "Now, please leave before I call the police." "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and tense. "This is my house, too. You can't just lock me out and pretend I don't exist." "Actually, I can," Vivian replied. "The deed is in my name, remember? I've already spoken to my attorney. You'll be hearing from them soon." She closed the door firmly and turned the deadbolt, leaning against it as she listened to Andrew's retreating footsteps, followed by the slam of his car door and the engine roaring to life. Through the living room window, she watched his BMW pull away from the curb with unnecessary speed. Only when he was gone did Vivian realize her hands were shaking. She moved to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, drinking it slowly as she processed the encounter. Andrew's reaction hadn't surprised her. He'd always lashed out when cornered, but the cold calculation behind his attempts to manipulate her had. Had he always been this way, and she'd simply failed to see it? Or had the years changed him into someone she no longer recognized? Either way, the clarity she felt now was undeniable. There was no going back, only forward, into a future she would need to reimagine completely. Vivian's phone rang, displaying Patricia's name on the screen. She answered immediately. "Andrew just called Richard," Patricia said without preamble. "He's claiming you've locked him out of the house and frozen all his accounts. He wants to stay with us." "That's all true," Vivian confirmed, "though I didn't freeze his personal accounts, only our joint ones. It's not my fault he doesn't have his own bank account at 39. Patricia sighed heavily. Richard told him he's made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. Not in those exact words, but that was the gist. How did he take it? About as well as you'd expect. There was shouting, then he hung up on his father. Patricia paused. "Vivian, we want you to know that whatever happens between you and Andrew, our relationship with you doesn't change. You will always be our daughter." Tears pricked at Vivian's eyes. "Even if I divorce your son?" "Especially if you divorce our son," Patricia said firmly. "What he did was unforgivable. If I were in your shoes, I'd do exactly the same thing." The conversation with Patricia left Vivian feeling strangely buoyant. She'd feared losing not just her husband, but his family as well. The people who had given her the sense of belonging she'd craved all her life. Instead, they'd chosen her, affirming what she'd always suspected, that the bonds of love could be stronger than the bonds of blood. That afternoon, Vivian began the process of reclaiming her space. She rearranged the furniture in the living room, moved her clothes to the center of the closet, and replaced Andrew's books on the shelves with her own that had been relegated to boxes in the spare room. Small changes, but significant ones. As evening fell, she ordered herself a pizza, half mushroom, half olive, a combination Andrew had always vetoed, and opened her laptop. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to browse travel websites, dreaming of places she might go alone. Spain had always called to her, with its warm people and rich history. Andrew had preferred tropical destinations with beaches and all-inclusive resorts. Perhaps it was time for Vivian to see Barcelona, to walk the streets of Madrid, to taste authentic paella, and dance to flamenco music. She fell asleep on the couch, laptop still open to images of the Sagrada Familia, a half-eaten slice of pizza on the coffee table beside her. For the first time since seeing that red phone, Vivian dreamed, not of Andrew or of Julia or of the life that had crumbled around her, but of sun-drenched plazas and the taste of freedom. 3 months passed in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding a life. Spring had given way to summer, and Vivian sat in her attorney's office, pen poised over the final divorce agreement. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching on her emerald earrings, the only gift from Andrew she'd kept, not out of sentiment, but because they were rightfully hers, purchased with her bonus money, despite his claims to the contrary. "Once you sign these," Meredith Barnes, her attorney, explained, "the documents will be filed with the court. Given the prenuptial agreement and the circumstances of the dissolution, I don't anticipate any issues. You should be legally divorced within 30 days. Vivian nodded, scanning the pages one last time. The terms were fair, perhaps even generous, considering Andrew's infidelity. He would keep his car and personal belongings, his retirement account, and a cash settlement that Vivian had insisted on including. She would retain the house, her own retirement funds, and the majority of their shared assets. Andrew had fought the terms initially, hiring a shark of a lawyer who'd tried to claim that his client deserved half of everything despite the prenup. But when Vivian's attorney had calmly pointed out that the existence of the affair violated a morality clause in their agreement, Andrew had backed down quickly. "You're sure about the settlement amount?" Meredith asked, not for the first time. "Legally, you don't owe him anything." "I'm sure," Vivian replied. "It's not about what he deserves. It's about who I am." With a steady hand, she signed her name on the indicated lines, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief as she formed each letter. When she finished, she set down the pen and took a deep breath. "Congratulations," Meredith said, gathering the documents. "You're almost officially single again." The word single struck Vivian with unexpected force. She hadn't been truly single since her mid-20s, having met Andrew shortly after graduate school. Now, at 35, she was starting over, not just romantically but in every aspect of her life. "Thank you for everything, Meredith," Vivian said, standing and extending her hand. "You've made this process as painless as possible." The attorney shook her hand warmly. "That's my job, though I have to say, you've been one of my most reasonable clients. Most people in your position would have wanted blood. I just wanted it over with," Vivian admitted. "The longer we dragged it out, the longer I'd be tied to him." Outside the attorney's office, Vivian paused on the sidewalk, tilting her face up to the warm July sun. She'd taken the entire day off work, anticipating that the signing would leave her emotionally drained. Instead, she felt oddly energized, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. On impulse, she pulled out her phone and called Patricia. "It's done," she said, when Andrew's mother answered. "I just signed the papers." "Oh, sweetheart." Patricia's voice was warm with understanding. "How are you feeling?" "Lighter," Vivian replied honestly. "Like I can finally start looking forward instead of back." "That's wonderful to hear. Richard and I were just about to have lunch in the garden. Would you like to join us? I made that cucumber soup you love." Vivian smiled. In the months since discovering Andrew's betrayal, her relationship with his parents had only strengthened. They'd stood by her through every step of the divorce, offering support without judgment. Richard had even accompanied her to the bank when she'd needed to refinance the mortgage in her name alone, his steady presence a comfort during the stressful process. "I'd love that," Vivian said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." The drive to the Whitmans' home was familiar and soothing. Vivian rolled down the windows, letting the summer breeze tousle her hair as she navigated the tree-lined streets. When she arrived, Patricia was waiting on the front porch, arms open for a hug. "You look wonderful," the older woman said, holding Vivian at arm's length to study her face. "There's a glow about you today." "Freedom looks good on me," Vivian replied with a small smile. In the backyard, Richard was setting the patio table with Patricia's best summer china, the blue and white pattern that only came out for special occasions. When he saw Vivian, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "There she is," he said, pulling her into a bear hug. "Our brave girl." Lunch was a leisurely affair, the conversation flowing easily between serious topics and light-hearted banter. Richard shared stories from his morning golf game. Patricia discussed her latest book club selection, and Vivian filled them in on her promotion at work, a silver lining to the past few months, as she'd channeled her emotional energy into her career with impressive results. "Have you heard from him?" Patricia asked eventually, the question gentle but direct. Vivian shook her head. "Not since the mediation session last month. His lawyer communicates with mine, but that's it." She hesitated before adding, "I heard through a colleague that he's taken a job in Seattle. Apparently, he starts next month." Richard and Patricia exchanged a glance. "He mentioned something about a job opportunity when he called last week," Richard admitted. "But he was vague about the details." "You still talk to him," Vivian observed. "It wasn't a question." "He's our son," Patricia said simply. "Despite everything, that hasn't changed." She reached across the table to squeeze Vivian's hand. "But you're our daughter too, by choice rather than by blood. That makes the bond just as strong, if not stronger." Tears threatened, but Vivian blinked them away. "Thank you," she said softly, "for choosing me." After lunch, as Patricia cleared the dishes despite Vivian's offers to help, Richard led her to a quiet corner of the garden where a stone bench sat beneath a flowering arbor. "I have something for you," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "It's not much, but Patricia and I thought you might be able to use it." Curious, Vivian opened the envelope to find a travel voucher for a major airline. "What's this?" "A little bird told us you've been dreaming of Spain," Richard said with a twinkle in his eye. "Patricia found your browser history when she borrowed your laptop to look up that recipe last month." Vivian laughed. "Caught red-handed, I guess." "We want you to go," Richard continued, suddenly serious. "To Spain, or anywhere else your heart desires. You've spent too many years compromising on your dreams, Vivian. It's time to start living them." The generosity of the gift, not just the monetary value but the sentiment behind it, left Vivian momentarily speechless. She looked down at the voucher, then back up at the man who had been more of a father to her than her own had ever been. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "Say you'll send us postcards," Richard replied with a gentle smile, "and that you'll come back to us when you're ready." That evening, after a tearful goodbye with promises to visit again soon, Vivian returned home to find a small package on her doorstep. The return address was from a bookstore in Seattle, but she recognized Andrew's handwriting immediately. For a moment, she considered leaving it unopened, or even throwing it away. But curiosity won out, and she carried it inside. At her kitchen counter, Vivian carefully opened the package to reveal a leather-bound travel journal with her initials embossed on the cover. Inside was a brief note in Andrew's familiar scrawl. "Vivian, I heard about your trip to Spain. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. This doesn't make up for anything, but I wanted you to have it. Be happy." Vivian ran her fingers over the soft leather, conflicting emotions washing over her. The journal was exactly the sort of thing she would have loved in their married life. Thoughtful, practical, personal. But coming now, after everything, It felt like a bittersweet reminder of the man she'd thought she was marrying versus the one she'd actually married. She placed the journal on her bookshelf without making a decision about whether to use it. That could wait. For now, she had plans to make, a trip to book, a new life to envision. Over the next 2 weeks, Vivian threw herself into preparations for her Spanish adventure. She took online lessons to brush up on her college Spanish, researched off-the-beaten-path destinations, and bought a new wardrobe that reflected the woman she was becoming rather than the woman she had been. Gone were the conservative suits and sensible pumps of her married life. In their place, flowing dresses, comfortable sandals, and bold accessories that expressed her rediscovered sense of self. The night before her departure, Vivian hosted a small dinner party, her first since the separation. Patricia and Richard came, of course, along with a few close colleagues who had supported her through the worst of the divorce. The house, once a shrine to her failed marriage, had been transformed with new paint, rearranged furniture, and artwork that spoke to Vivian's personal taste, rather than the compromised aesthetic she and Andrew had settled on. "To new beginnings," Richard toasted, raising his glass as they sat around Vivian's dining table, "and to our brave, beautiful Vivian, who reminds us all that endings can also be doorways." The others echoed the sentiment, and Vivian felt a surge of gratitude for these people who had become her chosen family. Whatever lay ahead in Spain, adventure, reflection, perhaps even romance, she would return to a home filled with love and support. Later, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, Vivian stood in her bedroom, packing the last few items for her trip. On impulse, she reached for the leather journal Andrew had sent, turning it over in her hands. After a moment's hesitation, she placed it in her suitcase, not as a memento of him, but as a blank page waiting to be filled with her own story, one that had nothing to do with their shared past. As she zipped the suitcase closed, her phone chimed with a text from Patricia. "Sleep well, sweetheart. Tomorrow, you spread your wings." Vivian smiled and texted back a heart emoji, then set her alarm for the early morning flight. As she drifted off to sleep, her dreams were filled not with regrets or what-ifs, but with the endless possibilities that awaited her across the ocean. In Spain, yes, but more importantly, in the undiscovered country of her own future. The 30-day waiting period for the divorce finalization passed while Vivian was walking the ancient streets of Barcelona, sampling tapas at local bars, and photographing the sunset over Gaudí's architectural masterpieces. She received the final decree via email, reading it on her tablet while sitting at a sidewalk cafe in the Gothic Quarter. Around her, life pulsed with energy. Street musicians playing flamenco guitar, tourists and locals mingling in the late afternoon sun, the scent of espresso and fresh-baked bread filling the air. Vivian closed the email and set down her tablet, taking a sip of sangria as she observed the scene around her. A man at a nearby table caught her eye and smiled, a genuine, appreciative smile with no agenda behind it. She smiled back, feeling a flutter of possibility, then returned to her people-watching without expectation. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Vivian felt completely present in her own life, neither dwelling on the past nor anxiously anticipating the future. She was exactly where she needed to be, becoming exactly who she was meant to be, one moment at a time. That night, in her charming hotel room, with its wrought iron balcony overlooking a quiet plaza, Vivian finally opened the leather journal. On the first blank page, she wrote, "Today, I begin again." 1 year after signing the divorce papers, Vivian stood in the sunny kitchen of her remodeled townhouse, arranging strawberries on a homemade cake. The renovations she'd dreamed about for years but Andrew had always deemed unnecessary had finally been completed. Walls knocked down to create an open-concept living space, the dark cabinets replaced with light blue ones, windows enlarged to let in more natural light. The house, like its owner, had transformed into something brighter, more authentic, more aligned with its true nature. "Are the strawberries straight enough?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder at Patricia, who was arranging flowers in a vase at the kitchen island. "They're perfect," Patricia assured her. "Charlotte is going to love it." At the mention of the name, Vivian's heart swelled. 6 months ago, after returning from Spain and settling back into her life with newfound purpose, she had made the decision that would change everything. The adoption process had been challenging. Mountains of paperwork, home studies, interviews, waiting, but last week it had finally happened. 5-year-old Charlotte Rose Whitman had come home. Now, as Vivian put the finishing touches on the cake for Charlotte's welcome party, she could hear the sound of giggles from the backyard, where Richard was helping the little girl test out her new swing set. The joyful sound floated through the open windows, wrapping around Vivian like a warm embrace. "I still can't believe she's really here," Vivian said softly, "that she's really mine." Patricia set down the flowers and moved to Vivian's side, placing an arm around her shoulders. "Believe it, sweetheart. You're a mother now, and that beautiful child adores you already." It was true. Despite the newness of their relationship, Charlotte had bonded with Vivian almost immediately. The social workers had marveled at how quickly the typically reserved child had opened up, asking within days if she could call Vivian Mommy. The memory of that moment, Charlotte's hesitant voice, her big brown eyes watching Vivian's face for a reaction, still brought tears to Vivian's eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you and Richard," Vivian said, leaning her head against Patricia's shoulder. "Your support through everything. The divorce, Spain, the adoption. You've been there every step of the way. And we always will be," Patricia promised. "That's what family does." The doorbell rang, interrupting their moment. "That'll be Maggie from work," Vivian said, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "She's bringing her kids for Charlotte to meet." As the afternoon progressed, the house filled with people, colleagues who had become friends, neighbors, even Vivian's parents who had flown in from Arizona, making an effort to be part of their daughter's life in a way they never had before. Charlotte, initially shy with so many strangers, gradually warmed up, especially to the other children who eagerly showed her how to play tag in the backyard. Vivian moved through the gathering, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but her eyes constantly sought out Charlotte, checking to make sure the child wasn't overwhelmed. During a quiet moment, she found herself standing next to Richard, watching as Patricia knelt in the grass, helping Charlotte make a daisy chain. "She's a natural grandmother," Vivian observed with a smile. Richard nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "She's been practicing for years with our neighbors' kids. But this is different. Charlotte is family." The simple statement touched Vivian deeply. "I've been meaning to ask you both," she said hesitantly. "I know it might seem strange, given everything with Andrew, but would you be willing to be Charlotte's official grandparents? I want her to know you as Grandma and Grandpa, not just as Patricia and Richard." Richard's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. "We would be honored," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than you know." Later, after the cake had been eaten and the presents opened, after the guests had departed and Charlotte had been tucked into her new bed with its canopy of twinkling fairy lights, Vivian sat on the patio with Patricia and Richard. The summer evening was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze, the garden fragrant with jasmine and roses. "I have something for Charlotte," Patricia said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small gift-wrapped box. "But I wanted to check with you first." Curious, Vivian unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Patricia and Richard on one side, the other side empty. "I thought maybe a picture of you could go on the other side," Patricia explained, "so she can always keep her family close to her heart." "It's beautiful," Vivian whispered, closing the locket carefully. "She'll treasure it. Thank you." "Ooh, there's something else," Richard said, exchanging a glance with his wife. "We've been thinking about this for a while now, and with Charlotte's arrival, it seems like the perfect time." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Vivian. "We've updated our will." Vivian opened the envelope with questioning eyes, scanning the legal document inside. Her breath caught as she realized what she was reading. "You're naming me as your heir?" she asked incredulously. "But what about—" "Andrew will be provided for," Patricia assured her. "But the house, the majority of our assets, we want them to go to you and Charlotte." "But I'm not your daughter," Vivian protested weakly. "Not by blood. Blood is overrated," Richard said firmly. "You became our daughter the day you walked into our lives, Vivian. Nothing, not divorce, not distance, not even biology, changes that fact." Tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll bring Charlotte to Sunday dinner every week," Patricia suggested with a gentle smile. "Say you'll let us spoil her rotten and teach her all the things grandparents are supposed to teach." "Of course," Vivian agreed, wiping at her tears. "She needs you both in her life. I need you both." The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Charlotte's upcoming enrollment in kindergarten, the family vacation Patricia and Richard were planning for all four of them at Christmas, the garden redesign Vivian was considering for the fall. As they talked, Vivian felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that transcended any conventional definition of family. Later that night, after Patricia and Richard had gone home with promises to return the next day for a quieter visit with their new granddaughter, Vivian checked on Charlotte one last time. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, her dark curls spread across the pillow, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Richard had brought her. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of Charlotte's chest, marveling at how completely this child had captured her heart in such a short time. Adoption had always been part of her plan, even during her marriage to Andrew. While he had consistently postponed the discussion, citing financial concerns or career timing, Vivian had held on to the dream. Now, standing in the soft glow of Charlotte's nightlight, she understood that the universe had known exactly what it was doing when it placed that red phone on her side of the bed 1 year ago. The thought of Andrew no longer brought pain or anger. In the months following their divorce, she had worked through those emotions with the help of therapy, supportive friends, and her own determination to heal. The last she'd heard, through Patricia's occasional updates, Andrew had settled in Seattle, started his own consulting firm, and begun dating someone new. Vivian wished him well, genuinely, and without reservation. Their paths had diverged, as they were always meant to. 6 weeks after Charlotte's welcome party, on a crisp September morning, Vivian loaded a picnic basket, a blanket, and an excited 5-year-old into her car. They were meeting Patricia and Richard at the Botanical Gardens, Charlotte's first official outing with her new grandparents since the adoption had been finalized completely. "Mommy, will there be ducks?" Charlotte asked from her car seat, bouncing with anticipation. "Yes, sweetheart," Vivian answered, adjusting the rear-view mirror to catch a glimpse of Charlotte's delighted face. "And Grandma Patricia packed bread for us to feed them." "A grandma," Charlotte repeated, testing the word with a smile. "I never had a grandma before." "Well, now you have the best grandma in the whole world," Vivian assured her. "And the best grandpa, too." At the gardens, Patricia and Richard were waiting at the entrance, their faces lighting up at the sight of Charlotte running toward them, arms outstretched. Richard swept her up in a bear hug, spinning her around until she squealed with laughter. Patricia embraced Vivian, the two women watching with matching smiles as Charlotte began chattering excitedly to Richard about the ducks they were going to feed. "She's wearing the locket," Patricia observed, noticing the silver chain around Charlotte's neck. "She hasn't taken it off since I gave it to her," Vivian replied. "She likes to open it before bed and say goodnight to all of us." They spent the day wandering through the gardens, Charlotte's endless energy and curiosity leading them from one discovery to another. A butterfly landing on a flower, a hidden statue among the trees, a patch of clover where she insisted on searching for one with 4 leaves. By mid-afternoon, they settled on their blanket near the duck pond, unpacking the picnic Patricia had prepared. As they ate sandwiches and shared stories, Vivian found herself watching Charlotte with her grandparents, the easy affection, the inside jokes already developing, the way Patricia gently tucked a strand of hair behind Charlotte's ear with the same tenderness she'd always shown Vivian. In those moments, biology seemed irrelevant. This was family in its truest form, chosen, nurtured, cherished. When the day began to wane and Charlotte's energy finally showed signs of flagging, they packed up their belongings and headed for the exit. At the parking lot, Charlotte insisted on going home with her grandparents for a little while longer. "Please, Mommy," she begged, her brown eyes wide and persuasive. "Grandpa promised to show me how to play chess." Vivian exchanged glances with Patricia and Richard. "If it's not too much trouble." "Trouble?" Richard scoffed. "Having our granddaughter over is never trouble." "I'll bring her home before dinner," Patricia promised. "Unless you'd like to join us? I'm making lasagna." "Actually," Vivian said, "I have a few errands to run. Why don't I pick her up around 7? With Charlotte happily settled in her grandparents' car, Vivian found herself with an unexpected afternoon of solitude. She drove to her favorite bookstore, browsing leisurely through the travel section. Her fingers traced the spines of guides to Italy, Greece, France. Future adventures she now planned to share with Charlotte when the time was right. At the register, the cashier commented on her selections. "Planning a trip?" "Eventually," Vivian replied with a smile, "making dreams for the future." By 7 o'clock, Vivian pulled into the familiar driveway of the Whitman home, the house glowing warmly in the early evening light. Before she could even ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal Charlotte, her face alight with excitement. "Mommy, guess what? I learned to play chess, and I almost beat Grandpa. And Grandma let me help make cookies, and I didn't even spill anything. And look what we found in their attic." Charlotte held up a small wooden music box, ornately carved with flowers and birds. "Grandma says it's very old and special, and now it's mine to keep." Vivian looked questioningly at Patricia, who appeared behind Charlotte in the doorway. "It was my grandmother's," Patricia explained. "I've been saving it for the right person. Charlotte seems to be that person." The unspoken words hung in the air, that Patricia had perhaps once intended the heirloom for a daughter of her own, or later for a daughter-in-law who would remain part of their family. Instead, life had taken unexpected turns, creating connections that transcended conventional relationships. "Why don't you show your mother how it works?" Richard suggested, joining them at the door. Charlotte carefully opened the music box, and the delicate notes of Claire de Lune filled the entryway. "Isn't it pretty, Mommy?" "It's beautiful," Vivian agreed, her voice thick with emotion. She met Patricia's eyes over Charlotte's head. "Thank you." "Family treasures should stay in the family," Patricia said simply. As they said their goodbyes with promises for Sunday dinner in 2 days, Vivian felt a sense of completion she had never experienced before. The journey that had begun with heartbreak and betrayal had led her here, to a child who needed her love, to in-laws who had become parents, to a life richer and more authentic than anything she could have imagined. Driving home with Charlotte, chattering happily in the back seat about her adventures with Grandma and Grandpa, Vivian caught a glimpse of herself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her was not the same one who had seen a red phone on her side of the bed that night so long ago. This woman was stronger, wiser, more compassionate, not despite her pain, but because of it. "Mommy," Charlotte's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Are you happy?" The question, so simple yet so profound, made Vivian smile. "Yes, sweetheart," she answered truthfully. "I'm very, very happy." "Me too," Charlotte declared, hugging her music box close to her chest. "I love our family. Our family." The words echoed in Vivian's heart as she drove toward home. Not the home she had once shared with Andrew, but the home she had created for herself and Charlotte, filled with light and possibility and love that transcended traditional boundaries. In the end, Vivian reflected, the red phone that had shattered her world had also set her free. Free to discover her own strength, to redefine family on her own terms, to build a life that honored her authentic self. The betrayal that had once seemed like an ending had been merely a doorway, painful to walk through, certainly, but leading to wide-open spaces where joy waited to be found. As Charlotte hummed along to the car radio, Vivian made a silent promise to herself and to her daughter to always choose love over bitterness, courage over comfort, truth over illusion. These were the lessons she hoped to teach Charlotte, not through words, but through living them every day. The sun was setting as they turned onto their street, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day would dawn tomorrow, bringing its own challenges and triumphs, but Vivian was ready for whatever came. She had everything she needed: herself, her daughter, her chosen family, and the wisdom that comes only through walking through fire and emerging stronger on the other side. "We're home," she announced as they pulled into the driveway. "Home?" Charlotte repeated, the word filled with contentment and belonging. Yes, Vivian thought, her heart full to bursting as she helped Charlotte unbuckle her seatbelt. They were home, not to a place, but to the lives they were meant to live, to the love they were meant to share, to the family they had created together. And it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.